The Justin Fields experiment is a failure, and it's a big mark against this Jets coaching staff and front office. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, October 20th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day, and a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Well, it is not a very happy Monday for New York Jets fans as the Jets fell to the Carolina Panthers 13-6 yesterday at MetLife Stadium. Another really ugly performance. The Jets record falls to 0-7 on the season, but there's more to this game than the loss. There's more to this than the Jets being 0-7. The Jets had to bench Justin Fields at halftime of this game. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say they had to. Fields was that bad, and Fields has been playing that badly for weeks. And I think it's fair to say at this point, the Justin Fields experiment is a failure. And I think that's a huge mark against this new coaching staff in front office. I think it's a microcosm of how this coaching staff in front office have not inspired any confidence. And it's a sign that things need to change. They need to start showing us something. And this is the topic of today's show. And we can start by talking about Fields. You know, it was a dismal performance. And I think with these first round quarterbacks who don't pan out, it's very easy to make excuses for them. But at the end of the day, Justin Fields is on team number 3. He's on coaching staff number 4. He's in year number 5. He's not playing well enough. I think that in this Jets fan base, as I spoke with people during the offseason, there was a lot of realism about Fields. People that I spoke with in the fan base were very clear-eyed about this. The Jets needed somebody to play quarterback. You know, if it wasn't Fields, it was going to be a similarly uninspiring option. Fields, you know, on paper had some upside, but I don't think anybody was really expecting it to pan out. I think we all knew the odds were pretty low that this was going to pan out, that Justin Fields, that this experiment was going to be successful. That said, I mean, we're talking week 7 halftime that it's over. And you have to remember, Fields missed a game due to injury. So it was really 5.5 games it took for this Fields experiment to fail. And I think that really, really makes you question the people running this team. I think it really has to lead to questions about the decision-making processes the Jets have. I think it has to lead to questions about the way these guys are being coached, because as uninspiring as Justin Fields has been through his career, and, you know, this is year 5, he's on team number 3. Typically, a first-round pick doesn't get to team number 3 in year 5 unless there are some pretty substantial issues. But as uninspiring as Fields has been through his career, this is the worst he's ever looked. He did not look this bad in Chicago. And I think that there are lots of different angles to this. Number one, I think one of the most important things any regime has, coaching staff and front office, one of the most important things they have to show is the ability to target the right types of players. Players that maybe underachieve with their previous team, but we can get more out of them. They have a skill set that we can work with, and we know how to get the most out of them. And when you do that at the quarterback position, it is very, very important. It's the most important position on the field. The Jets targeted Justin Fields as their number 1 priority this offseason. And they thought that they could unlock him the way maybe Minnesota unlocked Sam Darnold, the way maybe Tampa Bay unlocked Baker Mayfield. You want to go back a couple of years, the way Tennessee unlocked Ryan Tannehill. You can talk about the reclamation projects across the league, the way the Colts this year are unlocking Daniel Jones. There have been a lot of recent first-round failures with their original team who have gone to another team and had success. And part of this is, you know, you get a couple of years in the league, you understand how to operate at the quarterback position at a higher level. You know, defenses that maybe perplexed you in year 1 and year 2, by the time you're a little bit deeper into your career, you understand how to deal with them. But also better coaching, better infrastructure, a system that works better for you. That's what the idea was when the Jets signed Justin Fields. And I don't think the Jets really ever implemented anything that could work with Justin Fields. I mean, I was looking through this last week with Tanner Angstrand, and I mean the rate that the Jets were running pass plays with either run pass options or play action, which creates simpler reads. And for a quarterback who's developing as a passer, you want to be at the high end. You want to be at the high end of the league when you talk about the rate at which you're throwing those passes. Jets were near the bottom of the league throwing those types of plays with Justin Fields. I mean, you look at this game, I don't understand, first of all, why Fields even started. Because if Fields' confidence level was that low, and you could see it on the field. I mean, you could see that he did not have any confidence in what he was seeing. You could see that he was really struggling to get to his reads. And when you play with hesitancy in the NFL at quarterback, you can't function. There's just no way you can have success, because the quarterback position in the NFL of 2025 is all about timing. Timing has to be precise, and you have to be able to let it rip when your receivers got a window, because windows close quickly in this league. When you play with hesitancy, you've got no shot. And Fields has been playing with hesitancy for weeks. And heading into this game, I felt like, if Fields was in a good place mentally, if he kind of shook off the struggles of the last couple of weeks, then yeah, fine, you start him. It was clear, though, that this confidence level was gone. I mean, you could see that in his post-game interview. You could just see his body language. He looked like Zach Wilson in 2022 or Sam Darnold in 2020. Now, I know this was after the game, but on the field during the game, you could just see he was playing with no confidence. I don't understand on the first series why you would go with a 3rd and 5 play and throw it on 3rd down and 4th down. I don't understand why they passed on the field goal, but if you knew you were going for it on 4th down, why would you not run it on 3rd down? And this was an issue with Tanner Angstrand that we're going to get to in a little bit. But you can look at this from the big picture. You can look at it from the small picture. I don't think the Jets really designed an offense. I don't know if Justin Fields can be developed, but if he can be, the offense the Jets designed around him was never going to make it work. And if you look at like the offense the Jets have been running, it's just so misaligned with what Justin Fields' skills are supposed to be that if I was a cynic, I would say it seems like the Jets just signed Justin Fields to have a big name at quarterback to try and hype the fans up for the season. Because it just doesn't seem like that they had any intention of building the type of offense that could work. But, if you're somebody who's not a believer in Justin Fields, well, then you could just look at the evaluation that they thought they could get more out of him than they really could. It's one thing for this to be underwhelmed. It's one thing for Justin Fields to kind of fail. I don't think any of us really thought that Justin Fields was going to be the long-term quarterback for this team. I think we all knew that the best case scenario would be he'd play well enough to stick around for a couple of years and buy the Jets a little bit of breathing room when it comes to drafting a quarterback. They could wait to pick the right guy. They wouldn't necessarily need to go into 2026 feeling a lot of pressure to pick a quarterback. And if they drafted somebody, if Fields might play well enough to enable the Jets to start that guy on the bench, they wouldn't need to step into the lineup immediately until he was ready. We knew that was the best case scenario. I don't think that anybody saw, maybe a few people who were real skeptics on Fields, but I don't think most people saw this failing to this extent. If failing to the extent where Justin Fields is on the bench at halftime of week 7, where Justin Fields is on the bench at halftime of start number 6 this season. This is a colossal failure. And when you get it wrong to this extent on something as important as the quarterback position, I think it opens up major questions about what you're doing. I think it opens up major questions about your talent evaluation process. It opens up major questions about the systems that you're running, especially because, it's kind of a double whammy what Tanner Angstrand's doing. He's running systems that really are not NFL best practices in 2025, but he's also not running systems that align with what Justin Fields' skills are supposed to be. And I think that, in some ways, this coaching staff is kind of hiding behind Justin Fields' struggles. It's easy to say, well, the way Fields is playing, he couldn't run an offense effectively no matter what you do. And that may be true, but there's still things that give you better odds of success, and the Jets are not running them. This is really bad. I think this is a huge mark against this regime. And if it was the only issue, then maybe it would be easier to get past. But ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about some of the other problems we're seeing with the Jets coaching staff and front office through the first 7 games. Unfortunately, there's not really a lot you can hang your hat on for hope with these guys. There are many issues. We'll get into them continuing here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Rippling. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS, that's SAD, software as a disservice. And that's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. By uniting your employees, teams, and departments in one system, Rippling removes the bottlenecks, busywork, and silos your software created. Everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access runs automatically and perfectly in sync. It's seriously simple to use and gives companies one source of truth for their people, data, and everything they touch. Whether you want to run your entire HR, IT, and finance operations as one, or just fill in the gaps in your software stack, Rippling can do it all. And right now you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/lockedonnfl. Learn more at rippling.com/lockedonnfl. That's rippling.com/lockedonnfl for 6 months free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You can pick more or less on player projections, like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. It's quick. You can make your lineups in under a minute. And PrizePicks just added stacks, so if you want to ride with a player, you can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow other players on the app and copy their lineups with one click. And the new injury reboot feature, if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't count against you. And there's a special max discount promotion live on the board right now. For the Golden State Warriors versus Los Angeles Lakers game on October 21st, Steph Curry is discounted to only needing more than half a point to win. Mix and match players from football, basketball, and baseball to build your dream lineup today. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The Jets are 0-7, and they had another terrible loss yesterday to the Carolina Panthers. In that loss, the team benched quarterback Justin Fields. In the first segment, I talked about how the failure of Justin Fields with the Jets, to me, is a big mark against this regime, this coaching staff, this front office. But it's not the only issue we've seen. In fact, I want to flip this around a little bit because we're now 7 games into Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji's tenure, and the Jets don't have a win. I thought about a simple question yesterday. What has this regime done in these first 7 games to inspire confidence? And I don't know that I really have an answer for that. Part of this is the Jets keep losing games in different ways. It's almost like, a boat that springs a leak. And whenever you plug up that hole, a new leak springs. That's what it's like every single week with this team. In yesterday's game, obviously the quarterback was a big issue. And the quarterback's been a big issue through much of the season. But we really saw this team's glaring lack of depth at the wide receiver position play a big role in this loss, because in the second half, Tyrod Taylor came in, and if we're being honest, Tyrod Taylor did not play well. Now, you can make excuses because he had to come in the middle of the game. He did not get the first team reps all week in practice, and there was a moment in the first half. Taylor came in briefly for Fields when Fields had to be evaluated for a concussion, and there was a penalty that I think you could probably put on Taylor, not working with the team in practice through the week. There was a penalty on an illegal shift where both Mason Taylor and Alan Lazard were moving pre-snap. And when you get an illegal shift penalty with 2 guys moving, it's usually on the quarterback for snapping the ball too quickly. And maybe Tyrod just didn't have the timing down. But you watch this game, it was not a very impressive performance by Tyrod Taylor. Still, the receivers were bad. And there were 2 big plays. The Jets left 2 big plays on the field in the passing game. One was a ball Alan Lazard did not come down with. That was a poor throw by Tyrod. Lazard was open deep. It was kind of a trick play where they snapped the ball to Breece Hall in a wildcat formation. Ball eventually went back to Tyrod for a deep pass, and Lazard was behind the defense because it seemed like Carolina bid on it. Tyrod badly underthrew the ball, but it was still a ball. It wasn't just a ball Lazard could have caught. It was a ball Lazard should have caught. And Lazard did not come down with it. Later in the game, there was a deep ball to Arian Smith. It could have been a touchdown. It was a ball. I'm not going to say he should have caught it, but it was a ball that could have been caught. And you look at the 4 receivers the Jets are using now with Garrett Wilson out. You've got Allen Lazard, who has been a sub-replacement level receiver when he hasn't played with Aaron Rodgers through his career. This is the second year he's playing without Rodgers. Second year, he looks unplayable. You've got Tyler Johnson, a career backup. You have Josh Reynolds, who has been, I've talked about this a lot, 8 years in the NFL. 2 of those 8 years, he's been his team's third leading receiver. You've got Arian Smith, who's a 4th-round pick, who probably should be on a practice squad right now. The receiver position is really important. I remember in the offseason, Aaron Glenn talking about how critical the receiver position is. And this is the group the Jets rolled out there. It's not just that they're bad. It's the total lack of upside. I remember in 2020, the Jets signed Brashad Perryman. And it was rough. And you knew going into the season, the odds were not great of Brashad Perryman being good. But at least, this was a guy who finished the previous season on a red-hot tear. He had a great December of 2019. And he had a first-round pedigree, and he had physical tools. And the Jets were limited that offseason, just like they were limited this offseason. They at least got somebody who you thought could have upside. I remember when the Jets drafted Stephen Hill in 2012. And they went into that 2012 season with not a great receiver group. And Stephen Hill was very raw. He's really just had like the size-speed combination. But you at least saw what they were thinking. They got these guys, and they're bad, but there was no chance any of these guys was going to be any good. And this is a microcosm of other things. What position group is outperforming expectations this year? What unit is outperforming expectations this year? I can't come up with any. What unit is playing consistently well? I can't come up with any. Who are the guys the Jets brought in who are exceeding expectations? Again, I can't really come up with any. Maybe Jawan Briggs, the defensive tackle, the backup nose tackle. But, that's a backup nose tackle who's getting a handful of snaps a game. Maybe there are a few moves that look okay so far. I think Briggs and Harrison Phillips have been pretty decent. Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is off to a pretty good start so far as the slot corner. But, those aren't legacy moves. Those aren't moves that you look at and say, that's a steal, at least right now. I'm trying to find something to hang my hat on with this coaching staff and front office. Something that tells me these guys know what they're doing. I haven't found anything. And it can come in many different areas. It can come in a position group that's outperforming expectations. It can come in big time additions that you made that maybe seemed under the radar at the time, but are having a big impact. It can come in getting more talent out of a position group than you were expecting. Instead, if anything, guys are underperforming. You have guys like Will McDonald and Jamie and Sherwood who may not have been stars, but clearly have taken a step back this year. You just look across the offensive line. John Simpson had a good season last year. It wasn't because of the coaching, but he's taken a big step back this year. The offensive line feels like it's underperforming. There's nothing really that good about the team at the moment. There's nothing that really inspires confidence that anybody in this coaching staff and in this front office knows what they're doing. I think the best thing you can look at is the defense right now, because the last 2 weeks we've seen an appreciable change in the defense. And we've seen the defense give up 13 points, both losses because the offense hasn't been able to get into the end zone either game. But, maybe that's a sign the defense is making strides. Now, the question is whether that's sustainable, because we saw Bryce Young miss some throws in that game. We saw Bryce Young miss open receivers that could have blown this game open earlier. Is this a case where maybe the defense has found its footing a little bit? And it does seem like the defensive line's playing a lot better since Jermaine Johnson's gotten into the lineup, returning from that injury he suffered week 2. Some of the changes in the secondary, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. at slot corner, Malachi Moore at safety in place of Tony Adams. It feels like those have been upgrades. But it's only been 2 weeks. Is it a case where this is just a short-term spark? Because sometimes guys go in, you mix it up a little bit, it gets the team playing on a different level. And we saw that a little bit yesterday when Tyrod came in. It definitely felt like there was more energy to the way the Jets were playing on offense after Tyrod came in. You knew it wasn't going to last, though. Sometimes these short-term sparks really kind of fade quickly. Or is it the case where this Jets defense has improved? I do think philosophically they've limited the big plays. I think that they've cut down a lot of the mistakes. It feels like this defense has become simpler. It feels like they've become more dedicated to avoiding the big play. And when you force other teams to put together 10, 11 play drives, that's tough to do because it's tough for guys even in the NFL to go that long without making a mistake. We're seeing a lot more bend but don't break from the Jets. And then it feels like in the second half of these games, the defensive line's heating up a little bit. Maybe that's the thing we can lean on right now. And I think we'll have more information on that after this upcoming game against the Cincinnati Bengals. But, when you miss on something as big as Justin Fields, and then you look across everything else on this team, and you see very little reason to believe positive things about the people running the team, it's a big issue. And that's going to have to change. Because ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about what we need to look for over the final 10 games of the season from this coaching staff and from this front office. I mean, they're not going to get fired after 7 games. They're probably not going to get fired after 1 year. But we need to start seeing some things move forward. We'll talk about what those things are as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details, and Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel the craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you could drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda. Move and be moved. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season has arrived, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, try player props, even follow the live line during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. Well, there have not been many great game days for the New York Jets so far this season. Looking ahead to Week 8, Jets playing the Cincinnati Bengals. Jets are 4.5-point underdogs, and I'm not sure that line's going to stay. I think it might move more towards Cincinnati during the week. Bengals coming off a huge upset win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action, though. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. Again, it's FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. We are talking about the Jets' 0-7 start after they lost yesterday to the Carolina Panthers. Another really ugly game. This was the second straight time the Jets allowed 13 points and still lost the game. And the reason they lost the game was they could not get into the end zone on offense once again. The Jets had to bench their starting quarterback, Justin Fields. And I think it's clear that Fields' time in New York will come to a very, very early end. I cannot imagine he's going to be back in the starting lineup this coming week when the Jets take on the Cincinnati Bengals. I would have to imagine Tyrod Taylor will take over as the starting quarterback for this team for the foreseeable future. And as I said earlier, I think that the failure of Fields, the fact it's been this dramatic, is a big mark against this coaching staff and front office. And the problem is you look across this team. You look across the performances, you look across the roster, you look at how the units are performing, and there's not really any area where you can say this regime has done a good job through the first 7 games. Now, fortunately, it's only 7 games. And despite what some fans want, I can't imagine that these guys are going to get fired before the end of the season. And even once we get to the end of the season, I have a tough time imagining the Jets moving on from Aaron Glenn and Darren Mucci after 1 year. It's possible. And, one of the themes of my Monday shows this year has been me saying, I don't think it's going to happen, but the odds just got a little bit higher yesterday. And once again, we're in week 7, and I can tell you, I don't think it's going to happen, but the odds just got a little bit higher yesterday, and they are higher than they've been at any point this season. The way to short circuit those odds is to see improvement going forward. And, every single week, it seems like we see the graphic. Coaches who started 0-6, coaches. Now we're up to coaches who started 0-7. And you see a lot of the worst guys who've ever coached in the NFL on that graphic, guys who started 0-7. We're talking about some of the really dreadful coaches. But you also see guys who were pretty successful. Kyle Shanahan's one of them, the one that Glenn gets compared with constantly because he worked under him in Detroit, Dan Campbell, but also some guys who maybe aren't on the level of like those elite coaches, but at least quality coaches. Brian Flores, who started 0-7 in Miami in a truly hopeless situation in 2019, ended up getting that team to 5 wins, which normally 5 wins wouldn't be that impressive, but that my 2019 Dolphins team had a lot of people thinking they would be 0-16. They were viewed for a stretch early that season as perhaps the worst team in modern NFL history. They ended up going 5-11, and Flores followed that up with back-to-back winning seasons. Now, there were some internal issues in Miami. Flores got into some battles with the wrong people and ended up getting fired after his 3rd year. But I think most people would conclude that Flores is not a terrible coach. Maybe he's not a great coach. He's not a terrible coach. And Zach Taylor, I think it's an open question how much of Zach Taylor's success came because he's a good coach and how much came because he had Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins on his offense. I think a lot of people could look really good with that sort of firepower on offense, but I think we'd say Zach Taylor's not a terrible coach. He started 0-7. So there are enough decent to good coaches to know that, 0-7 is not necessarily the end of your career, but I think we need to see improvement. And I think part of this is, you look at some of these coaches and you see they started 0-7. I think the question that doesn't get asked enough is, did these guys improve along the way? I think the answer to that is almost certainly yes. I mean, I would say Kyle Shanahan's a better coach today than he was in year 1 in San Francisco. I would think Brian Flores got better during the course of his Dolphins tenure. Again, I think a lot of the reasons he got fired were not necessarily because of his coaching. I think there were some issues within that organization. Zach Taylor, look, they were in the Super Bowl within 2 years of him starting 0-7. Obviously he didn't get in the way of that. And Dan Campbell. And, Campbell, of course, is the guy that's compared with Glenn the most because Glenn came from Detroit. Glenn was part of that coaching staff that started so miserably. It's a comparison Glenn's making. It's a comparison. It's clear the Jets are floating this comparison in the media because you look around, national writers, local writers, you see a lot about the 2021 Lions and articles that are written about this Jets team. Is that fair? Well, you can't assume the Jets are going to have the exact same trajectory as the Lions had under Aaron Glenn as the Lions had under Dan Campbell. But it is a reminder that, even a really rough start, even a start halfway through year 1 like this, which is just dismal, for which there's nothing redeeming, is something you can overcome. It is something you can get past. But I think we're going to need to see improvement from Glenn along the way. I think we're going to need to start to see tangible progress. Now, number one that comes to mind, it's the low-hanging fruit. This defensive renaissance that we've seen in the last 2 weeks needs to be sustained. I think that's very important. I think we're going to need to see growth from people in the coaching staff. I was really critical of Steve Wilks those first 5 weeks. I don't think I was really unfair to Steve Wilks. I think Steve Wilks did a miserable job. And I do believe that sometimes, somebody does a miserable job early in the season, they start doing better, and you say, well, what was with the criticism? Well, the criticism was because the guy wasn't doing so well. But things are starting to improve. We'll see whether the Jets can sustain that. I think on the offensive side of the ball, Tanner Angstrand's been lousy, and it's easy to hide behind a lack of talent. And look, he has to deal with a quarterback who really lost all of his confidence. He's dealing with a wide receiver group that isn't good, but even so, there are just things Angstrand's doing that make no sense. I talked about the lack of RPOs and play action passes for Fields. There really aren't any deep shots designed in this offense. And in the second half of that game against Carolina, the Jets had 4 run plays in a close game where they were really challenged throwing the football. The Jets completely abandoned the run. There's no excuse for that. And of those 4 run plays, 2 were scrambles by Tyrod Taylor. So the Jets only called 2 run plays in the second half of that game. That's just inexcusable. And increasingly, to me, it's looking like Tanner Angstrand's looking like a guy who designs plays well, because I do think the Jets' plays are designed well. Sometimes you'll see like film breakdowns and someone will say, well, that's a really well-designed play by the Jets. I think that's fair, but there are different aspects of being an offensive coordinator. It doesn't seem like Angstrand has any concept of how to game plan or call plays, because the stuff the Jets are doing makes no sense. We need to see improvement from Angstrand because, Dan Campbell got rid of his first offensive coordinator in Detroit. He got rid of Anthony Lynn. Anthony Lynn was a former head coach. At the time, it seemed like it made sense. You want a new head coach. It's generally considered a best practice to have a former head coach on your staff. It just didn't work. And he fired Anthony Lynn and brought in Ben Johnson. I think that something's going to have to give with Angstrand going forward. The Justin Fields excuse is gone now. I know Tyrod Taylor's not great, but Tyrod Taylor's not Justin Fields. Tyrod Taylor is going to throw the football. And I know the wide receiver situation is not great. Well, Garrett Wilson's coming back. It's not the results. It's how we're getting there. And I think you can evaluate an offensive coordinator independent of the talent he's got. We've seen bad Jets offensive coordinators, and we've known that they're not good. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett had to run an offense with Zach Wilson, and Alan Lazard is his number 2 wide receiver, and a bad offensive line. We still knew he was bad. Adam Gase ran an offense with no talent. We could figure out, we were smart enough to figure out he was bad. Tanner Angstrand's had a lot of limitations personnel-wise. It's pretty clear he's not been good so far. That's got to get better. Lots and lots have to get better for this Jets team. And it would be nice if some of the guys they brought in start shining. There's going to be, we're a long way between now and the end of the season. And this could look differently in 11 weeks when the season ends. But we have to start seeing improvement. And if we don't, then we're going to have some interesting discussions near the end of the year. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.